the girl from the Li family, and I married into the Xuanwu Marquis Mansion one after the other. She married the eldest son of the Shen family, and I married the second son of the Shen family. The next month, there was unrest on the border, and Shen followed his father to the battlefield and died in battle. The girl from the Li family became a widow just after she got married. My husband suggested bringing my widowed sister-in-law to our house to take care of her. I agreed without knowing the previous circumstances. After that, my husband indulged her in plucking my favorite crabapple flowers, beating my maids, and even scheming to kill 2 people with me. Until I died, I heard him say, "Xuanwu, if it weren't for you, Shengsheng should have married me. Instead of marrying my short-lived half-brother, she would have become a widow at such a young age." Only then did I realize that my husband and his widowed sister-in-law had an old relationship and were having an affair. When she opened her eyes again, she went back to the time when she was 16 and the Shen family came to propose marriage.
Mom.
I won't marry the second son of the Shen family. I will marry the eldest son of the Shen family. My husband died early, and I am in power, so I can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, except for that shameless uncle and sister-in-law. 01. The autumn rain is miserable, and the lonely lamp is bright at night. And in front of me was a bloody red. The heart-wrenching cries, the heart-wrenching pain, and the child who is not born safely. My husband, whom I had been married to for 2 years, stood beside my bed, watching me in a state of despair. I heard the midwife sigh with regret and told him that the fetus could not be saved. I was also suffering from heavy bleeding and was afraid that I would not live for more than a quarter of an hour. He remained indifferent and silent. I still can't understand why he wanted me to die so miserably after being married to him for 2 years. I worked hard to support the household, was filial to my parents-in-law, and had children with him, so that he had no worries. On my deathbed, I took my last breath to get to the bottom of it. Why? At the last moment when death was sweeping towards me, I heard his cold and ruthless voice. "Xuanwu, if you hadn't insisted on marrying me, I would have been married to Shengsheng a long time ago, and she wouldn't have married my useless half-brother, becoming a widow at such a young age, suffering all kinds of grievances." Li Shengsheng, his widowed sister-in-law. It turned out that she was the one he loved most. It turns out that he has never truly loved me in the past 2 years. No wonder he takes such good care of Li Shengsheng. Could it be that the way he looked at Li Shengsheng was not innocent at all? No wonder he watched me die in childbirth without calling a doctor. My life is so miserable. When he opened his eyes again, the bloody red in front of him gradually faded until it disappeared. Perhaps it was God's mercy that not only did I not die in childbirth, but I also returned to the year when I was 16 years old. This year, I have not yet married Xuanwu. In this year of the previous life, the wife of Marquis Xuanwu came to propose marriage with a marriage contract arranged by the grandfathers of the 2 families. The military Marquis Mansion and the aristocratic family were truly a perfect match. Xuanwu is a young and talented man, and I am a lady from a wealthy family, so we are a perfect match. The marriage was soon settled. On June 16th of this year, Erlang of the Shen family in the Xuanwu Marquis Mansion got married to Yuehua of the Song family, who came from a noble family, and they lived happily ever after. On June 28th, the eldest son of the Shen family in the Xuanwu Marquis Mansion got married and married a girl from the Li family, a distant cousin of the Marquis' wife who had fallen on hard times. On the 9th day of the 7th month of that year, there was a war on the border. Shen Jida followed his father to the battlefield and died. The newly married girl from the Li family became a widow. The moment the body was brought back, Miss Li fainted on the spot and has been weak ever since. The second son of the Shen family took pity on his widowed sister-in-law, so he brought her to the Marquis Xuanwu's mansion and took good care of her. At that time, I, Song Jiayue, believed Xuanwu's words and felt very sympathetic towards Li Shengsheng, the young widow, and took care of her as if she were my own sister. But later, Li Shengsheng smiled at me proudly, and she said that even though I was a noble lady from a wealthy family, I still couldn't win my husband's heart. She said that even though she had been married, She was a million times better than me in Xuanwu's heart. She pulled my hand and jumped into the cold lotus pond. Xuanwu jumped into the water to rescue her and then slapped me hard. He called me vicious. That's not all. Xuanwu and the second prince deliberately framed me, saying that my Song family was forming a clique for personal gain and plotting rebellion. The forged evidence put more than 300 members of the Song family into prison. Some were sentenced to exile, and some were sentenced to beheading. It was a cold winter with heavy snow. I knelt in front of Xuanwu and begged him to save my entire Song family. But he kicked me in the stomach, which was 7 months pregnant, and the blood dyed the white snow red immediately. He had long hated me and believed that it was my Song family that had used its power to forcibly separate him from his beloved, so naturally, he was unwilling to save my life. I died in childbirth. Died in front of Xuanwu's cold eyes. Before I died, I thought a lot. If I could live my life again, I would definitely protect the entire Song family. I would never have any mercy on Li Shengsheng, and I would never marry Xuanwu. He doesn't deserve my true love for him. I just didn't expect that God really gave me the opportunity to return to this life. 2. The marriage between the Song family and the Shen family was arranged by the two grandfathers. At that time, the two old men were officials in the same court and admired each other very much, so they arranged the marriage between the Shen and Song families. Now that both elders have passed away, this marriage cannot be cancelled. I asked my mother to arrange my marriage with Dalong from the Shen family when the wife of Marquis Xuanwu came to propose marriage. The mother was very confused. Yuehua, the eldest son of the Shen family, is a concubine son. The second son of the Shen family will inherit the title of Marquis in the future. You are the daughter of the Grand Tutor. Do you really want to marry him? Have you thought it through? Besides, you met Xinjia Erlang once at a banquet a few years ago. At that time, you said he was a good person. Why did you suddenly change? But my mother didn't know that Xuanwu and I had met more than once. I kept him inside for many years. Tears welled up in my eyes, and my thoughts went back to a long time ago. That year, it rained lightly in the Bodhi temple, and the road was muddy. I slipped and almost fell. It was Xuanwu who pulled me up and saved me from falling into the mud and rolling down the hillside. He handed me the oil paper umbrella and said, "The road is slippery in the rain. Girl, please walk carefully." Then he turned and walked into the drizzle. At that moment, he was like a ray of light that broke through the rain and fog, supporting all my girlish excitement. But later, that beam of light became a rope that pulled me into the abyss and took me to the painful hell. When I came to my senses, tears had already fallen from my eyes and dripped into my mother's palm. The idea of rebirth is really ridiculous, and my death in the previous life was too tragic. I don't want my mother to know such a painful thing. After all, no one knows a daughter better than her mother. Seeing my gloomy expression, my mother stopped asking questions. He just sighed quietly. "Yuehua, father and mother only hope that you can find a good partner and live a peaceful and smooth life. As long as you like it, power and wealth don't matter." Although the eldest son of the Shen family has a low status, he is also famous in the capital. He joined the army when he was young, is young and promising, has good conduct, and is kind and gentle. Your father also praised him. Anyone who has the heart to defend his country must be good. I think my Yuehua will not be wronged if she marries him. I leaned on my mother's shoulder, trying hard to hold back the tears that were about to burst out. Power and wealth are naturally not a big deal. I only hope that the Song family will be safe and sound. According to custom, before a woman gets married, she has to go to the Yulao temple to pray for blessings, wishing that she and her husband will live in harmony and love for the rest of their lives. In my previous life, I also came here before my marriage, and I knelt in front of Yulao and prayed devoutly, asking him to let me live in harmony with Xuanwu and his wife, and grow old together. However, the only fate between Xuanwu and I is an ill-fated one, and no matter how much I ask for, it will only result in bad consequences. I didn't expect to meet Xuanwu here. Xuanwu was standing under the intertwined trees in Yulao Temple. The breeze blew away a few green leaves, which lightly landed on his shoulders. In his hand, he was holding a piece of red silk with some black ink stains on it. Although it was hard to see clearly, one could probably tell that it was a pledge of lifelong love. Shen Wangzi lowered his eyes and looked at the red silk in his hand, his eyes full of tenderness. The red silk was thrown high up and dangled on the branches of the intertwined tree. He turned around contentedly and saw me. I was about to go around him from the other side, but he called out to me,
Song Yue Hua.
The extremely familiar voice made me stop uncontrollably. Turning around, Shen Wangzi was walking towards me. He squinted his eyes and looked me up and down, but there was no trace of surprise in his eyes. Not surprising. After all, my looks are much inferior to the delicate and beautiful Li Xingxing. What's more, in his previous life, Shen Wangzi once told me personally that he never liked the ladies from noble families who put on airs and thought themselves superior. What he liked were talented women like Li Xingxing who were gentle, sensible, and knew how to write poetry. Shen Wangzi looked indifferent. Originally, my mother came to propose a marriage between you and me, but I didn't expect you to take the initiative to propose to marry my half-brother. You are quite self-aware. The talentless and dull lady and the rude and barbaric illegitimate warrior are also a good match. I hid my trembling hands in my loose sleeves with a faint smile on my face. Mr. Shen and Miss Li are both talented and beautiful, and they are a perfect match. I wonder when you'll get married? I can prepare gifts for you too. As soon as he finished speaking, Shen Wangzi's face darkened. He originally thought that as long as I didn't marry him, he would marry Li Xingxing. But my marriage with Shen Jianshan was settled, and Lady Xuanwu still refused to let him marry Li Xingxing. As stupid as he was, he never expected that the wife of Marquis Xuanwu looked down on her poor distant niece, and in order to sever the relationship between Shen Wangzi and Li Xingxing, she let them marry separately. She arranged for Shen Wangzi to marry the daughter of the Grand Tutor, who would bring him fame and fortune, and also helped Shen Wangzi's career. She let Li Xingxing marry Shen Jianshan and become Shen Wangzi's sister-in-law. Under moral ethics, this was completely impossible. The wife of Marquis Xuanwu had already made plans. But in her previous life, for the sake of her relationship with her son, she said that this marriage was because I was infatuated with Shen Wangzi and would not marry anyone else. My father loved his daughter so much that he used the marriage contract and his power to force him to marry me. It also caused Shen Wangzi to hate the entire Song family, which led to the tragedy of the Song family being wiped out. 03. Shen Wangzi became angry and left in anger. I prayed sincerely in front of the Yulao temple. As soon as the red wishing silk was thrown onto the twining trees, a drizzle began to fall from the sky. Huaiji opened the umbrella for me and said, "Girl, let's get down the mountain quickly, otherwise it will rain heavily and the road will be difficult to walk on." I nodded and walked down the mountain with Huaiji. When we were halfway there, we heard the sound of galloping horses splashing mud. Seeing me looking down the mountain, Huaiji stood on tiptoe to take a look and said, "Miss, it's the Xuanwu army, and the leader should be young Master Shen." The team galloped past on horseback, leaving me with only his back with his straw raincoat fluttering in the wind. I didn't even have time to see his face clearly. Huaiji helped me walk down, still muttering something. This young Master Shen doesn't look any worse than young Master Shen, and he's even more stable. She seemed to still be angry about Shen Wangzi's recent outrageous remarks. When we reached the foot of the mountain, the rain started to get heavier. Just as I was looking at the sedan chair and hesitating about what to do, a group of men dressed in soldiers drove over in a horse-drawn carriage. "Miss Song, please get in the carriage." I looked at the plain carriage and asked, "Shen's?" The man nodded. "Miss Song is indeed as smart as General Shen said." "It's not that I'm smart, but the carriage has the name of the Shen family hung on the front, and it's driven by a soldier, so it can only be Shen Jianshan." The man got off the car and put the stool away and continued, "General Shen was patrolling nearby. He heard that Miss Song was going to the Yulao temple to pray today. Seeing that it was raining, he asked his subordinates to take the girl back." I nodded and got into the carriage. The carriage was moving shakily and carefully, but Huaiji was looking around inside. I thought young Master Shen was a warrior who only knew how to wield swords and guns, but I didn't expect he also loves reading books. There was a thick stack of books in the carriage. I took a look and found that most of them were military books, mixed with a few scriptures and history books. I put the book back in its place and said softly, "He is indeed a careful person." I have always heard that Shen Jianshan is quite capable in the army, decisive and resolute in killing, and he once chopped off the head of an enemy leader with his own hands when he was 15 years old. He is a real killing god. Rumor has it that he has been in the army for many years, has no interest in women, and is a cold-blooded, rude, and reckless man. As a result, no noble lady in the capital is willing to marry him, and his marriage has been delayed. But now it seems that rumors cannot be fully trusted. 04. This year it was still June 16th. I wore a red wedding dress, a red veil on my head, and married into the Xuanwu Marquis Mansion with the beating of gongs and drums. In the bridal chamber, I met my husband of this life, the eldest son of the Shen family, Shen Jianshan. In fact, Shen Jianshan and I had never met in my previous life. He had been in the army with Marquis Xuanwu since he was young, and became a general at a young age. After he got married, he often stayed in the army and rarely stayed at home. Even on the day he married Li Shengsheng, I didn't go to the ceremony, because Shen Wangzi was drunk. Not long after, he followed Marquis Xuanwu to the border and died in battle. When the red veil was lifted by Xiqing, I was stunned when I looked up. I didn't know that Shen Jianshan, who was described by Shen Wangzi and Li Shengsheng as rude and unromantic, actually had such a good-looking appearance. Unlike Shen Huanyu's unruly appearance, Shen Jianshan has a posture as straight as a pine tree, a temperament as resolute as the sun, and beneath his sword-like eyebrows are a pair of eyes as deep as the night sky. His face is clear lines, making him look tough and handsome. Shen Jianshan stood in front of me with a serious expression and bowed to me. "Thank you, madam, for not disliking me. I will definitely treat you well in the future." The soldiers all reveal their courage in their words. Such solemnity reminds me of this day in my previous life. On the wedding night of the previous life, Shen Wangzi was helped back to his room by a servant in the middle of the night. He was already drunk and kept muttering "Shengsheng." At that time, the servant explained in a somewhat flustered manner that he meant to have children with me and continue the family line. Now that I think about it, the person he was talking about was Li Shengsheng. On our wedding night, my husband was drunk, leaving me sitting on the brocade couch, feeling aggrieved, watching the red candles burn until dawn. Everything had been foreshadowed, but I just didn't think about it carefully. Shen Jianshan looked at me straight, making me blush for no reason. Perhaps seeing my shyness, Shen Jianshan couldn't help but laugh. He took a few cakes from the plate and gave them to me. "Fill your stomach first. The guests haven't left yet. I still need to go out for some socializing. I'll come back later and bring you some food." I nodded to show my understanding. After all, it was the general's wedding, and those men all wanted to see the bride. Even though they were so far away from the front hall, I could vaguely hear the booing outside. Not long after Shen Jianshan left, the door was pushed open again. "It's Shen Wangzi." He stared at me intently, and the corners of his eyes gradually turned red. I frowned and said in a deep voice, "Second Master Shen, this is not the place you should come to." But I didn't expect that Shen Wangzi not only did not leave the new house, but closed the door and walked straight towards me. He grabbed my wrist and said, "Yuehua, why don't you want me anymore? You were supposed to be my wife." I lowered my eyes and tried hard to suppress the hatred boiling in my heart. It seems that Shen Wangzi has also been reborn. I shook off his hand and looked at him coldly. "Shen Wangzi, I have only met you once, and now I am your sister-in-law. Please stop talking nonsense and ruining my reputation. My husband will be back soon, get out now." Shen Wangzi's eyes were red, and his voice was sad. "Yuehua, you clearly have me in your heart." I really don't understand why he looks so painful. The pain in his eyes seems to be overflowing. But in my previous life, he hated me so much, and he was the one who killed me with his own hands. The person who hates me and despises me so much is now sad because I married someone else? How ridiculous. I said in a deep voice, Shen Wangzi, if you don't get out, I'm going to call someone. Shen Wangzi didn't seem to care about what I said. His face was flushed, and because he was closer, the smell of alcohol was spreading around him, and it was obvious that he was a little drunk. He stared at me and suddenly said, Song Yuehua, you can only be my wife. After saying that, Shen Wangzi came up to me, and the strong influence of alcohol covered me. His kiss fell on my neck, but his hands were tearing my wedding dress. Yuehua, as long as I get you, you will belong to me. We will be together for the rest of our lives. I will never let go. I struggled and panicked, but there was no way I could push him away. In desperation, I pulled out the golden hairpin on my head and held it in my hand. I thought, then let's die together with Shen Wangzi. At this time, Shen Jianshan came. His voice was different from the gentle one when he spoke to me just now, and became very cold. Shen Wangzi, you're looking for death. He pulled Shen Wangzi away with one hand and clenched the other hand into a fist, hitting Shen Wangzi's face hard. Shen Jianshan seemed still unsatisfied, and he pressed down on Shen Wangzi and punched him hard a few more times. Shen Wangzi was also unwilling to accept the defeat and fought with Shen Jianshan, even as he kept on making wild remarks. She should have been my wife, Shen Jianshan. You stole my wife. You are just a bastard. You are not worthy of her at all. Why do you compete with me? If I hadn't been a step late, she wouldn't have married you. Shen Jianshan didn't say much. He just kept punching Shen Wangzi in the face again and again. Shen Wangzi was no match for Shen Jianshan, who had practiced martial arts for many years. He was also drunk and passed out after being hit by a few punches. I was still in shock, and I felt a surge of grievance in my heart. I hurriedly shouted, "Husband." Only then did Shen Jianshan stop. He turned to look at me, took off his bright red coat, and put it on me. Shen Jianshan took the golden hairpin that I was holding tightly in my hand, helped me tidy up my messy hair, and said gently, "Don't be afraid." Soon, people in the mansion heard the noise and rushed over. When the wife of Marquis Xuanwu saw her son lying on the ground covered with wounds, she screamed and almost fainted. Marquis Xuanwu glanced at me, who was protected by Shen Jianshan behind him, and didn't say much. He just arranged for someone to send Shen Wangzi and Marquis Xuanwu's wife back to their respective courtyards. My wedding night ended in chaos. 05. On the second day of his wedding, Shen Jianshan was punished. Shen Wangzi was seriously injured. He just said that he was drunk and walked into the wrong room, so Shen Jianshan beat him up without asking any questions. Lady Xuanwu Ho would naturally not let the culprit Shen Jianshan go. She made Shen Jianshan kneel in the ancestral hall and punished him with 50 military sticks. 50 military sticks is already a severe punishment in the army, let alone a matter at home. It is obvious that Lady Xuanwu Ho blamed Shen Jianshan for snatching away her son's good marriage and was deliberately seeking revenge. However, Shen Jianshan refused to admit his mistake and refused to tell the whole story of last night, so he could only accept the punishment. After being beaten with 50 military sticks, Shen Jianshan fell to the ground in the ancestral hall. He was carried back into the house. The military doctor came and said that the 50 soldiers had been beaten very badly with sticks, injuring their muscles and bones. It would probably take 2 months to recover. After sending the doctor away, I applied medicine on Shen Jianshan. The back, which already had several scars, was now a bloody mess, looking extremely horrifying. Seeing that I didn't make a move for a long time, Shen Jianshan whispered, "Are you scared?" I shook my head, but his back was turned to me, so I didn't know if he saw it. But I noticed the sweat on the side of his face due to pain. I gently applied the cold ointment on his wound, and after bandaging it, I said softly, "Thank you, my husband." Shen Jianshan gathered his clothes, turned to look at me, and said seriously, "No need to thank me. You and I are husband and wife. I should protect you." I was stunned, and unconsciously, my eyes were filled with tears. Perhaps it was because of the lack of love between husband and wife in my previous life that I have never experienced the feeling of being protected by my husband. Shen Jianshan reached out his hand to wipe away the tears from my eyes and said softly, Yuehua, don't cry. I just had some minor injuries. It's nothing serious. I held back my tears and nodded gently. Shen Jianshan trains in the army all year round and rarely has such free time. When he had nothing to do, he would often read books, especially those military books, which he read over and over again many times. But every time, he read it very carefully and was able to gain some new insights from it. That day he read the military book again and was about to read the history book when he saw the zither I had placed in the corner. So he suggested, I've heard that Yuehua is an excellent zither player. Could you play a piece for me? Of course I am willing to do so. Played a song, General's Order. After he finished playing, Shen Jianshan turned to look at me and asked, besides playing the piano, what else does Yuehua like to do? I lowered my eyes to think, and finally shook my head. As a lady, she learned music, chess, calligraphy, and painting since childhood, and lived a dignified and housekeeping life. As for the word, it is really a bit of a luxury. Just like I had already fallen in love with Xuanwu in my previous life, but I also knew that as a reserved lady, I could only keep my feelings hidden in my heart. It was not until she learned about her engagement with the Shen family after she came of age that she felt fortunate that she could spend the rest of her life with the person she loved. It's a pity that my love didn't fulfill his wish, which led to the bitter consequences later. Shen Jianshan smiled and said, after I recover from my injury, I will accompany you to go boating on the lake and climb mountains. Anyway, there are still many days ahead.
Just think about it slowly.
I will accompany you to do what you want to do. I looked at him in surprise. My joy was beyond words. Shen Jianshan, on the other hand, turned his head away uncomfortably and didn't look at me. Suddenly, I remembered that Shen Jianshan's days were numbered. Less than a month later, he would go to war with his father and eventually die in battle. How could I let such a good person like Shen Jianshan die on the battlefield? I took the military book from his hand and called him by his full name for the first time. Shen Jianshan, promise me that you'll take good care of your injuries in the next 2 months. Just think of it as me, and the promise you made me of boating on the lake and climbing the mountain. Seeing how serious I was, Shen Jianshan also looked at me with great importance. He gently held my hand and nodded. Yuehua, for you, I will definitely take good care of myself. 06. The first time I met Li Shengsheng after my rebirth was in the back garden of Xuanwu Marquis Mansion. She was waiting for me here on purpose. As soon as Li Shengsheng saw me, she knelt down in front of me with tears in her eyes. Mrs. Shen, please go and persuade A's. He refused to take medicine these days and became seriously ill. He even called out your name in his dreams. Mrs. Shen, for the sake of your past affection, please go and see him. Li Shengsheng deliberately spoke loudly so that the servants around could hear it clearly. He even said something that made it seem like Xuanwu and I had a past relationship and wanted to ruin my reputation. I looked down at Li Shengsheng, who was kneeling in front of me, and scolded her softly. Miss Li, don't talk nonsense. I only met my second brother once before I got married, so how can we talk about love? But I heard that Miss Li and my second brother often recited poems and composed essays together, under the flowers and the moon. They are really a perfect couple. I bent down slightly and lowered my voice. Miss Li, you'd better try to please my second brother and get yourself a status as soon as possible. Otherwise, you'll be a distant cousin who depends on the Shen family for money all your life. Li Shengsheng looked at me. Her expression instantly became one of shame and anger, with crystal tears hanging on her long eyelashes. Mrs. Shen, how can you humiliate me like this? A's and I are innocent. She looked so pitiful, like a delicate little flower. In my previous life, because I saw that she was so delicate and pitiful, I believed what Xuanwu said, and I truly pitied her and took good care of her. Not only did she take good care of her, she even selected some beautiful jewelry from her dowry and gave them to her. However, she used a headache as an excuse to ask Xuanwu to uproot all the crabapple trees in my yard. When Xuanwu was not around, they had my Huaiji tied up and beaten severely on the pretext of theft. That beating almost cost Huaiji his life. Later, I was falsely accused of pushing her into the lotus pond, which led to me being slapped in the face by Shen Wangzi. Even in the end, when she became pregnant with Shen Wangzi's child, she used her own child to force Shen Wangzi to get rid of me and the baby in her belly. Every detail was her work. I always give it back. Seeing that I didn't say anything, Li Shengsheng suddenly stood up and ran straight to the lotus pond in the garden. With a splash, a lot of water splashed up. Huaiji tugged at my sleeve. "Madam, the second young master Shen is coming this way." Now I know why Li Shengsheng did this. She used the same tricks from her previous life, trying to make Shen Wangzi believe that I was a narrow-minded, jealous, and vicious woman. But this time, Li Shengsheng was destined to be disappointed. The reborn Shen Wangzi did not jump into the water to rescue her as he did in his previous life. He just arranged for his servants to fish Li Shengsheng out. Shen Wangzi still had bruises on his face, and he looked at me sadly. "Yuehua." Li Shengsheng was a little anxious and called out weakly, "A's. It's my fault. I shouldn't have come to ask Madam Shen to visit you. But I really can't accept her insulting me.
A's.
It's all my fault." Shen Wangzi looked at Li Shengsheng, who was lying on the ground pitifully, and then raised his eyes to look at me, who was as cold as water. As the sun set, Shen Wangzi stood still like a stone sculpture. I don't know if I was in a trance, but I seemed to see endless sorrow in his eyes when he looked at me. "Yuehua, you don't want to come and see me?" Hearing this, Li Shengsheng's eyes suddenly widened, and she looked at Shen Wangzi in disbelief. She never imagined that Shen Wangzi not only didn't feel sorry for her falling into the water, but was also heartbroken that I was unwilling to visit him. When he looked at me again, there was only hatred in Li Shengsheng's eyes.
07.
Li Shengsheng really doesn't have any decent tricks. She bribed someone outside and kidnapped me when I was out. When the black cloth was lifted, Li Shengsheng was sitting in front of me, casually playing with a white jade cup in her hand. This place is beautifully decorated with all the finest items and is much more luxurious than my boudoir before I got married. This is a villa that Shen Wangzi bought for Li Shengsheng. I said coldly, "Miss Li, you tied me here. Are you trying to get money or kill me?" Li Shengsheng seemed to think this question was ridiculous and sneered at me. "Of course I want your life." I really couldn't understand. "Why do you want to kill me?" In her previous life, she hated me for marrying Shen Wangzi, which forced her to marry Shen Jianshan, who died young and became a widow. But in this life, I married Shen Jianshan, the person she tried to avoid. Where did her hatred for me come from? Song Yuehua, you have everything you need, so naturally you can't understand my pain. My family fell into poverty when I was young, and I went to the Xuanwu Marquis Mansion. I persuaded the Marquis' eldest son to take a liking to me. I thought I could become a phoenix, but I didn't expect that you would appear. As she spoke, Li Shengsheng's voice carried a hint of hatred. "You've already married Shen Jianshan, and I thought I could be with Shen Wangzi as I wished, but he had just taken my body the day before, and he promised me that he would marry me regardless of everything, but the next day he heartlessly abandoned me and broke into your wedding room. I heard everything Shen Wangzi said in your new house that day from outside the door. He said you were his wife.
Then what about me? Who am I?
What is the value of all my efforts over the years? He was so devastated by you that he ignored me. He didn't even look at me when I fell into the water."
Song Yuehua, don't blame me.
"Only if you die can I win back Shen Wangzi's heart," I said in a deep voice. "Li Shengsheng, you can't keep Shen Wangzi's heart, so you blame me. Don't you think it's ridiculous?" Li Shengsheng was stunned for a moment, then knocked the white jade cup in his hand against the wall. The fragments held in his hand became sharp porcelain pieces. "Song Yuehua, you will die in my hands soon. You can figure out what is right and what is wrong on your way to the underworld." She raised her eyebrows proudly, walked to my side, pressed the sharp porcelain fragments against my cheek, gently scratched it, and landed on my neck before using force. The door was kicked open from outside. Shen Jianshan's furious face appeared in front of me. He quickly stepped forward and kicked Li Shengsheng to the ground. Without saying a word, He stepped hard on the back of Li Xingxing's hand. His whole body was shrouded in terrifying murderous aura, as if he wanted to crush her palm. I hurriedly called out, "Husband." Shen Jianshan then released his strength, turned around and hugged me in his arms. "Yuehua, don't take risks in the future." With blood on the corner of her mouth, Li Xingxing looked at Shen Jianshan, who suddenly appeared in disbelief. How? How did you know we were here?" I had already seen the hatred in Li Xingxing's eyes, so I was naturally not unprepared. The moment I was kidnapped, I secretly left clues, waiting for Huaiji to go back and report to Shen Jianshan to rescue me. Even if Shen Jianshan is too late, I have a dagger hidden in my sleeve and will never let myself die easily. I looked down at her again and smiled slightly. "Li Xingxing, I am Song Yuehua, a lady carefully cultivated by my family. How could I be convinced by your tricks?" I leaned forward slightly. "Li Xingxing, you hate the wrong person. The one you should hate is the man who betrayed you, not another innocent woman." When Li Xingxing and I looked into each other's eyes, a sad voice came from the door. "Yuehua." Li Xingxing and I looked sideways at the same time and saw Shen Wangzi, who had hurried over. Shen Jianshan frowned, picked me up by the waist, and walked out the door. As we passed each other, Shen Wangzi looked at me sadly and held my arm. "Why? I am always a step late. If I had come earlier, would you have seen my sincerity?" I turned my head and buried my face in Shen Jianshan's arms. Shen Jianshan got angry. His voice was filled with ice. "Second brother, Yuehua is my wife now. You should respectfully call her sister-in-law." He looked at Shen Wangzi with a cold face. "If you continue to speak frivolously, I'm afraid the bruises on your face will last for a long time." 08. After that, Shen Wangzi fell silent. I just heard that he had a big argument with Li Xingxing that day, and during the argument, Li Xingxing's long nails scratched Shen Wangzi's face. Shen Wangzi completely ignored Li Xingxing and placed her under house arrest in that villa. However, Shen Jianshan tore the wound on his back when he fought that day, and the wound that had just scabbed over opened again. He didn't say a word and held me all the way. It was not until we returned to the mansion that I realized his black brocade robe was stained with blood. Seeing me lower my eyes and purse my lips, Shen Jianshan comforted me softly. "Yuehua, I'm not hurt." I took out the medicine in silence and applied it on him carefully. After bandaging the wound again, Shen Jianshan stared out the window, then turned his head to look at me. "Yuehua, do you know where is the most beautiful place to watch the sunset?" I paused and shook my head. Shen Jianshan slowly smiled. The coldness between his brows gradually disappeared. He pulled the coat over the screen with one hand and walked out holding my hand with the other. "I'll take you to a place where you can see the most beautiful sunset." Shen Jianshan took me for a ride on horseback, and I could only feel the breeze whistling past. I had never experienced such a free feeling before. The horse's hooves gradually slowed down and stopped in a mountain area outside the city. The timing was just right. The sun was already halfway down, and a beautiful glow dyed the sky red. We sat side by side on the grass, quietly watching the red color gradually fade away, the bright moon rise, and the sun and moon alternate. Shen Jianshan took off his coat and put it on me. "It's cool at night." I smiled and said, "Let's go home, husband." Under the moonlight, on the horse's back, Shen Jianshan held me tightly in his arms. Somehow, I felt his breath was a little hot, so hot that my heart skipped a beat. That night, Shen Jianshan stayed in my room, saying that he was injured and needed care. But before that, he clearly refused to sleep in my room because he was injured. At night, he moved closer to me. "Yuehua, I'm a little cold. Can you come closer to me?" So I moved toward him. After a while, he said again, "Yuehua, my wound seems to have split open a little. Can you help me take a look?" I stood up, helped him take off his shirt, and looked at it over the candlestick. The silk cloth was still wrapped well and had not torn. Seeing me frown, Shen Jianshan said again, "Yuehua, my mouth is a little dry. Can you help me moisten it?" I nodded and got up to get some tea. But he pulled her into his arms, and his voice was somewhat coaxing. "No tea, just a kiss from Yuehua." As soon as I finished speaking, Shun Jianshan kissed me on my lips. He kissed me so carefully and passionately that I couldn't help but feel carried away. Faintly, my hand touched the silk cloth on his back. "Husband, your injury." His warm breath fell on my neck, and his voice was low and hoarse. "It's okay." 09. The next day, we slept until noon. Until his subordinates came to report, "General, there is an emergency at the border." Shun Jianshan stood up suddenly, his expression solemn. "Go and get ready. I'll be there soon." I also stood up and handed him his clothes. But a voice came from outside the house. "General, don't worry. The Marquis has already led the army to the battle, and the second young master volunteered to go with the army." The Marquis asked his subordinates to tell the general to take good care of his health and not to go this time. Shun Jianshan and I stopped moving at the same time. I don't know why, but when I heard that Shen Wangzhe was going to join the army, I felt uneasy. He always prided himself on being the eldest son, believing that he would inherit the title in the future and never thought about fighting on the battlefield. But now he has volunteered, which is really unexpected. Suddenly, I remembered my past life. After Shun Jianshan died in battle in his previous life, the military exploits of the Xuanwu Marquis Mansion and the Xuanwu army became stepping stones for Shen Wangzhe to make friends with the second prince. He used the power of the Xuanwu Marquis Mansion to help the second prince succeed in his bid for the throne, and even colluded with the second prince to kill the king and seize the throne. It was precisely because of this that he became the second prince's confidant, and with his high position and power, he was able to wipe out the Song family, a century-old noble family. And everything he did with great effort was for Li Shengsheng. Now that he and Li Shengsheng are almost broken up, he takes the initiative to go to war. What is his purpose? I thought for a moment and looked up at Shun Jianshan. "My dear, Shen Wangzhe has gone against his usual practice and followed his father to the battle. I'm afraid he has some plans. We must be on guard." I whispered, "I've heard that he has a close relationship with the second prince." Hearing this, Shun Jianshan's expression became even more solemn. "Now that the crown prince has not been decided, even my father dares not make friends with any prince. How dare he be so bold? Don't worry, Yuehua. I will take precautions in advance and will never let you get implicated." Shun Jianshan naturally believed what I said. After all, my father was the grand tutor, the teacher of several princes, so it was normal for him to know some of the inner workings of the royal family. And what I heard was from my father.
10.
In this battle, Shen Wangzhe relied on his memories from his previous life and quickly drove out the enemy. He also knew that the enemy had set an ambush in the canyon, so he did not pursue them and returned with a great victory. The first thing he did when he returned to Xuanwu Mansion was to come to me and speak directly. "Yuehua, do you believe in past lives and present lives? In the past life, you were my wife, we were in love, and we had a child. It's just my fault that I didn't cherish you well." Speaking of this, Shen Wangzhe looked a little gloomy. "Yuehua, I am now reborn. It is God's mercy to me that we can continue our past relationship." I frowned at him and said coldly, "I don't understand what you are saying. Even if there is a past life, there is only bad karma between us." Shen Wangzhe paused, then laughed like a madman. "It won't be long before I can reach the pinnacle of power. By then, Yuehua, you will still be my wife." He reached out and pinched my chin. "Song Yuehua, I must get you, and you can only be mine." Shen Wangzhe's hands gradually became stronger, pinching my chin so hard that it hurt, but he was completely unaware, as if he had fallen into a kind of uncontrollable madness. Quietly, I took out a dagger from my sleeve and stabbed him hard in the arm while he was distracted. The sudden pain made him let go of his hand suddenly. Shen Wangzhe looked at the blood dripping from his arm, then raised his eyes to look at me holding the dagger stained with his blood. He pulled the corner of his mouth. "Even if you hate me, I will never let go." Shen Wangzhe turned and left. After this departure, I didn't see him for a long time. Even though we lived under the same roof, we never met. The people that Shun Jianshan sent to follow Shen Wangzhe reported back that apart from frequently going to the villa, where Li Shengsheng was under house arrest, there was nothing unusual about Shen Wangzhe. The second prince who had colluded with him is now extremely diligent and obedient, and often accompanies the emperor in handling state affairs in the Qingjing Hall. But the more this happened, the more uneasy I became. It was the same in his previous life. Before usurping the throne, the second prince acted as a filial son in front of the emperor for a period of time, but his purpose was just to poison the emperor. The poison was smeared on the pen used to review memorials, and it seeped into the skin and poisoned the bone marrow. It would take only a month for the poison to take effect, and the symptoms would be very similar to a sudden serious illness. But no one expected that Xuanwu, who had lived a new life, would usurp the throne so much earlier. It seems that he can't wait any longer. 11. It was more than a month later that I saw Xuanwu again. It was a rainy day, and Xuanwu blocked me in the Bodhi temple. This is where I fell in love with him. He handed me an oil paper umbrella to block the drizzle falling on my head. Xuanwu, do you still remember this place? This is where we first met. You almost fell, but I caught you and gave you an oil paper umbrella that is exactly the same as the one you have now. Unexpectedly, the reborn Xuanwu still remembered the scene when we first met here. I shook my head slightly. I don't remember. Xuanwu slightly tightened his grip on the umbrella handle and said in a deep voice, Xuanwu, you have also returned to this life, right? I lowered my eyes and smiled faintly, but that smile was just on the surface and extremely cold. Since you already know everything, why bother to argue? Hasn't the harm you inflicted on me in my last life been enough, Xuanwu? Xuanwu lost his voice and sighed. In fact, ever since I knew you were going to marry Shen Jianshan, I guessed that maybe you were also reborn, but you refused to admit it after several attempts. Xuanwu, I was wrong in my previous life. I didn't cherish you well enough. Now that we are both reborn, can you give me another chance to make amends? I chuckled and raised my eyebrows. In your previous life, you were deeply in love with your sister-in-law Li Xingxing, and now you want to reconcile with me. Your sister-in-law. Xuanwu, you are really ridiculous and shameful. Could it be possible that you would be tempted if I became your sister-in-law? The merciless sarcasm made him pale. After a moment, he said, No, it was only after you died in my previous life that I realized how important you were to me. I always thought that my feelings for Li Xingxing were true love, and my feelings for you were just forced. But later I realized that my feelings for Li Xingxing were just pity and sympathy, and my feelings for you were true love that supported each other through thick and thin. Xuanwu talked a lot. He said that after I died, he started to have nightmares every night. In his dreams, he saw my appearance and the tears I shed when I cried, and asked him why he wanted to kill me. Whenever he sees the crabapple flowers, he would involuntarily think of me sitting in the crabapple garden and playing the piano for him. He kept the purse I embroidered for him close to his body and never took it off. He said that after I died, Li Xingxing seemed like a different person, arrogant, willful, and unreasonable. She once asked him to throw my body into a mass grave and feed it to the dogs, and also asked him to burn down the yard where I lived. She even threatened him with the baby in her belly, and he hated being threatened the most. In the end, he and Li Xingxing became more and more dissatisfied with each other. Li Xingxing couldn't bear the loneliness, so she started to hang out with a servant in the mansion. Xuanwu spoke so emotionally that a tear fell from his eyes. I couldn't help but sneer. Xuanwu, you are too greedy. You want everything. He wants beautiful women to accompany him in reciting poems and composing essays while chasing after the wind and snow, and he also wants dignified and noble women to bear children for him and take care of the household chores. You are reluctant to let Li Xingxing be your concubine, and you dare not ask for a divorce from me, but you are trying to kill my entire Song family. I looked at him coldly. Now you are telling me these false words. How much do you think I will believe? Xuanwu, you make me feel sick. The continuous autumn rain gradually turned into a drizzle. Xuanwu was silent. After a moment he said, Xuanwu, I said, you can only be mine. I ignored it and just walked down the mountain. When they reached the foot of the mountain, they did not see Shen Jianshan's carriage. Xuanwu waved his hand, and another luxurious carriage drove over and stopped in front of me. He looked smug. Don't wait, Shen Jianshan won't come. He looked in the direction of the palace and said, Shen Jianshan should have died long ago in his previous life. Now he has lived for a few more months. That should be enough. Shen Wangzi pulled me onto the carriage and said, Yuehua, I will take you to collect the body of your short-lived husband.
12.
When Shen Wangzi brought me to the palace, it was silent. Apart from the bloodstains and corpses on the ground, it seemed no different from usual. The people standing on both sides bowed to him and called him respectfully, Second Master Shen. Someone stepped forward, smiling apologetically. Second Master Shen, His Highness is waiting for you in the Imperial Palace. Shen Wangzi's glory at this moment was even greater than his aura as a first-rank prime minister in his previous life. He pulled me along the avenue leading to the Imperial Palace. Yuehua, you will soon be the prime minister's wife, a first-rank imperial lady. Are you happy? Don't worry, the second prince promised me that he would never harm your Song family. You can rest assured and stay with me forever. I said nothing and followed him to the palace. There, I saw the second prince sitting on the dragon throne. Shen Wangzi bowed to him proudly. Congratulations, Your Majesty, on ascending the throne. Your Majesty, please grant me a marriage with the Grand Tutor's daughter, Song Yuehua. However, the only response he got was endless silence. After a moment, Shen Wangzi realized that there was no one else in the hall except the second prince. Just as he was wondering, a spear came whizzing and pierced his leg. Shen Wangzi cried out in pain and fell to his knees on the ground. He only heard a deep and steady scolding. Rebellious son. Following the voice, it was Marquis Xuanwu, the person being protected by him, and Shen Jianshan was the emperor, who was supposed to have been poisoned to death. Shen Wangzi was stunned, looking at the emperor in disbelief, and then pointed at Shen Jianshan and said viciously, Shen Jianshan, you are not dead. Shen Jianshan snorted coldly, strode forward, hugged me with one hand, and pulled out the spear stuck in Shen Wangzi's leg with the other hand. You are the one who deserves to die. Then he waved his hand, and a man came out from the side hall. It was the tied-up second prince. The second prince sitting on the dragon throne was just a little eunuch with a disguised appearance. Now that things have come to this, what else is there to not understand? Shen Wangzi sat on the ground in a daze. When he looked up at me, his eyes were full of loss. So, you planned all this, right? No one except me knows his plan. I let go of Shen Jianshan's hand, walked to Shen Wangzi and whispered, You are extremely stupid. I've used the same method in my previous life, but I'm using it again in this life. I haven't made any progress at all. Shen Wangzi, you are destined to be an incompetent waste. I stood up leisurely and watched coldly as Shen Wangzi was taken away by the guards. He was like a puppet with its strings cut. He allowed the guards to drag him away without any reaction. He just stared at me with lifeless eyes. 13. The rain stopped, and the next day the sky was clear and sunny. Because Shen Wangzi was imprisoned, the wife of Marquis Xuanwu fainted on the spot. I went to the villa where Li Shengsheng was under house arrest. I didn't expect that she had fallen to this point. Shen Wangzi resented her betrayal in her previous life, so he broke her legs and scratched her face. The once beautiful face now only had a few terrifying winding scars left. Seeing me coming, she sat on the ground, giggling. Are you here to see how miserable I am? As she said that, she lifted the blanket covering her legs, revealing her broken legs in front of me. Look, it's rotten already. Are you satisfied? Li Shengsheng stared at me like a bloodthirsty monster. Song Yuehua, you win. A's chose you. I guess you're going to be the wife of a first-rank prime minister soon, right? He clearly promised me at the beginning. Liar, liar. All liars. I looked at this embarrassed woman coldly. I won't be the wife of a first-rank prime minister. My husband is Shen Jianshan. Li Shengsheng stared at me, seemingly not understanding what I meant. In her eyes, Shen Jianshan had died as a result of Shen Wangzi's scheme, but I would rather be a widow? I raised the corners of my mouth and chuckled. Shen Wangzi has been imprisoned. His grand plan failed at the last moment. Shen Jianshan and I had been prepared for this, and even sent my father to persuade His Majesty and Marquis Xuanwu. Neither of them was willing to believe that their son could do such a heinous act. But the emperor was suspicious, especially afraid of the ambitious prince. The emperor agreed to our plan of luring the enemy into a trap, pretended to be poisoned, and died in front of the second prince. However, the second prince did not expect that the moment he sat on the dragon throne holding the imperial seal, guards rushed out from all directions, surrounded him, and captured him on the spot. The Xuanwu army arranged by Shen Wangzi in the imperial palace had already been ordered to withdraw by Shen Jianshan using real military orders. The fight was silent, but it ended in the drizzle. If I were to live my life over again, I would never make the same mistake again. Li Xingsheng was stunned for a moment, and then started crying and laughing like a madman. Ha ha. Shen Wangzi, you deserve it, Retribution. It's your retribution. Who told you to be fickle-minded and prefer a married woman to me? I left the villa and found a hot-tempered old woman to take care of her daily life. When I handed the silver to the old woman, I said softly, "Just keep his life, the rest is up to you." The old woman was very smart and nodded. But not long after that, Li Shengsheng committed suicide. I heard that the old woman was really cruel and would beat and scold Li Shengsheng at every turn. One of her teeth was knocked out by a slap on the face. She was once pampered by Shen Wangzi and lived a life even more luxurious than me, the daughter of the Grand Tutor. How could she endure such pain and grievances now? That day, the old woman brought the meal over and went to do other things. Li Shengsheng smashed the porcelain bowl and cut her wrists to commit suicide. By the time the old woman found out, he was already dead.
14.
At the request of Marquis Xuanwu, Shen Wangzi was not executed but sentenced to exile in the northern border. It is cold and desolate all year round, and exiles often freeze to death there. This exile is no different from death. Upon hearing the news, the wife of Marquis Xuanwu fell seriously ill and was bedridden, unable to get up. When Shen Wangzi was exiled, the wound on his leg had not healed yet, and he walked with a limp. I'm waiting at the city gate. When he saw me, his gloomy expression brightened up a little. Yuehua, thank you for coming to see me off. I didn't answer him. I took out a glass of wine from the lunchbox that Huaiji was carrying and handed it to him. Shen Wangzi, let's end our past and present lives with this glass of wine. Shen Wangzi stared at the wine in my hand for a long time, took it with a smile, and drank it all in one gulp. He said, Yuehua, if there is an afterlife. I interrupted him. Do you remember I said that we were doomed to fail in our previous life? Shen Wangzi nodded. I smiled and approached him, whispering, since this is a bad fate, you should repay me so that I can settle the grudge from my previous life. As for you and me, we owe each other nothing in this life, and we will never see each other again in the next. Shen Wangzi's face immediately turned pale, with only tears dripping down his cheeks. I turned around calmly and listened to Shen Wangzi's painful voice coming from behind me without any mercy. I put a poison that can penetrate the intestines in that glass of wine. At this moment, he felt as if there were thousands of pets biting every inch of his skin, and the stinging pain came from all over his body, invading his entire body.
It was so painful that he wanted to die.
Soon, his whole body would be ulcerated, and he would die. Without even turning my head, I whispered, Shen Wangzi, we are even now. 15. As soon as I walked through the city gate, I saw Shen Jianshan's carriage parked there. When he saw me, he got out of the carriage and helped me into it. I heard that praying at Yulao Temple is the most effective. Why don't you come with me? I lowered my head and suppressed the sadness of surviving the disaster. When I looked up again, I saw a face with a bright smile. What do you want to pray for, my husband? Shen Jianshan's cheeks turned slightly red, and he gently held my hand. I want to live with Yuehua till old age, loving each other for the rest of our lives. The breeze blew the curtains, letting the sunlight in. The soft sunlight fell on Shen Jianshan's face, soft and beautiful. My heart moved, and I leaned my head on his shoulder. Okay, I only wish that your heart is like mine, and I will never let you down. End of full text.